Hey, nice Atypical Daydream t-shirt.
Thanks. It's my favorite podcast.
Mine too. But where can I get a t-shirt?
It's easy. The link is in the show notes.
That is easy. I'm gonna go get one right now.
That's a great idea.
Thanks. Bye.
You bet. Stay cool.
I was strong. I was getting very strong emotionally and physically because of how hard my life was and just trying to be a very independent person.
Hello, my atypical daydreamers. Welcome to the show. Today, I have two special guests for you. One is my daughter when she was 4 years old, which is one of my favorite ages because 4-year-olds have a lot to say, but they still have banana brains, which is so fun. So stick around for her. My first guest is my old family friend and the closest thing I have to an aunt, Joanna Athey. Now, Joanna has known me since I was a very, very tiny dude. She's always been a really strong example to me of what it looks like to follow that voice within. When I was young, I remember hearing a story about her taking a trip to Europe when she was 16 with no parents. And at the time, I was like, you can do that? Today, Joanna shows us what it means to stand firm in who you are, wherever that takes you.
One of my first memories was from a church that I went to on Christmas Eve in Felpham, a small village where we lived outside Bognor Regis in the south of England. And I remember the Christmas tree, and I remember singing Away in a Manger. And on the Christmas tree, there were all these kind of little gifts of like maybe a car or a truck or a little broom and a little tray to pick up crumbs or something from the floor. And I really wanted the truck. And I knew that the presents were there for us. And I didn't get the truck. I got the broom and the handle for the little brush. And it was a first awareness for me about the difference of being male and female. His trucks were not for little girls, but little brooms were for little girls. I was strong. I was getting very strong emotionally and physically because of how hard my life was and just trying to be a very independent person. Out of lack of money, having to be independent, I was bought a bicycle so I could ride to school. Other kids were taken in their car to school. So I was riding my bike to school right through junior high school. And just before I went to high school, I bought my own car because I'd had a job. I was an incredibly responsible person. And people saw that. And I saw the teachers at my school saw that. And they even provided me with little jobs like taking the basketball money at the door and giving me 50 cents after the first 30 minutes, and that was my job. And then I did really well with that, so I was put in the lunchroom cafeteria, and then I did really well with that. And by the final year I was there, I was actually getting a paycheck from the Houston Independent School District for $12.10 every 2 weeks to buy my first car. By the time I left junior high school, I had the money to buy my first car of $150. So I was a little independent person just doing my life and off by myself cycling all over Houston on Saturdays, put my backpack on, throw in some Kippers, have some crackers, just a little feral kid running off doing life and nobody really telling me what to do. I was totally unleashed. As I look back on my life and I compare it with my brother, my one sibling, I kept wondering why he thought his life was so great. And I kept thinking, my life sucks. And what is the matter with me? And as I started to address these issues, probably in mid-20s, 30s, and see that everything wasn't just as the way I wanted it, I started looking back at my childhood and realized it was trauma for me. And it was trauma for my mother. I was in trauma from the day I was conceived, which I have been searching all my life to figure out, why am I like I am? What has happened? It's extraordinary. It's unusual. And then later on, as I grew into teenage years, and I kept trying to get back to England. And so my first trip back to the UK was when I was 15 years old. And I was going, I paid for my ticket. My parents were like, you can't go by yourself. And I'm like, sure I can. I've got all my relatives over there. I'll stay with them. It'll be fine. No, you need to go with your brother. Well, he didn't have the money, and we'll lend it to you. They never said they'd lend me the money. But anyway, I had mine. I was going. They got the money to him, and he came with me. So we spent 2.5 months in Europe and England when I was 15 years old, celebrating my 16th birthday there with my relatives. Letters came from England to America to my mom from her sister who had a dairy farm. My mom was very close to her brother who died in 1954. So she felt like she was very primary to his 3 children, which were David, Anne, and Carol. And David was the one who was through his education as a solicitor and had the time and did the 3-week trip with my brother and I to Europe from the UK. So there were 2 kind of totally different trips. There was one of me coming over to stay with my aunt who had the dairy farm, and she had 4 boys, and 3 of them were still at the farm. I got to know them intimately well while I was there staying with her on this dairy farm, working with the cows and doing all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. It was fabulous. And she was, having had 4 boys, I was like another boy. And I loved that. I loved it. I got to do all the stuff guys would get to do. Ride the tractor, drive the tractor, do all this stuff. I was able to be who I wanted to be, not this little girl in dresses that they were all trying to do. And I think the other thing that was very prominent for me in that trip was that when we went to Europe, my brother and my cousin David were a couple. They had a friend with each other. They could talk to each other. And in youth hostels back then, they went to the men's dorm and I went to the women's dorm. I had nobody. There was a lot of that trip. I was still by myself when I wasn't with a family. When I got to Europe, I found a whole different situation. I mean, I was so upset with my mother because she didn't prepare me for this. She, as a boarding school student, had been to France. She must have noticed that there were things that were different about toilets. Somebody should have educated me about toilets when I crossed the world. I mean, it was just mind-boggling. There were some holes in the ground with 2 ceramic footprints there. How do I do this? What? And I'm sitting there, well, I can't talk to my brother about these things. It's just like there's nobody there. So I'm just, I was just astounded at how different the world was. But I was also so in love with how different everything was and the expansiveness of different cultures. And we got all the way to almost Istanbul. We traveled by train for 3 weeks. We stayed in youth hostels all during that time. I was sold. I was sold on the experience of looking at the better world. And the best thing that anybody could do would be to experience these cultures because it's so isolating to only know your own culture. It's so boring to only know your own culture.
Hey, it's Josh. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. And if so, are you wanting more road stories? Well, good news. I've got you covered. Consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories that there just wasn't time for. And you'll be supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the link in the show notes, and thanks. Now back to the show. My next guest is my daughter, June, and today she has 2 very short stories for you. Not exactly road stories, but entertaining nonetheless. She's 10 now, but when I recorded her, she was 4. The setup was simple. I show her a picture or something, and then I'd say, "Tell me a story about it." For the first story, I had shown her a painting of the wild and crazy actor Klaus Kinski, dressed as a conquistador, and a clown mask I had lying around. Here's the story that followed.
This is a story about Klaus and Mr. Happy Face. Okay, so once upon a time, 2 boys met each other. One was a clown, one was a grumpy guy with a helmet on. And they met at the river. And they had a super fun time. And the mask said, "Hey, I don't have a body, but I can fly, because I don't have a body." And a flying mask. And they brought a picnic, and they only brought hot dogs and juice. It was good. And they ate it all. And, the clown was showing funny tricks, like juggling and, rolling over, acrobating, and dancing silly, doing a flip. And Klaus left it at the end.
The next story came from me showing her a picture of the TV personality Dr. Phil with his big mustache and a photo of his odd and tacky house that he was selling at the time, which included machine guns mounted on the dining room wall. Enjoy.
Let me tell you a story about the time I went to Dr. Phil's house with my friends. And guess what? There's a lot of booby traps there, so watch out. There was flying birds that picked on your face, and also some flying mustaches that tickle you, and also some... That was probably it about the booby traps. And also, he fed us very yucky foods. It was litter snacks, and egg on human, baby sandwiches with baby inside, and also some yummy, 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 yucky. He tried and tried and tried to make me eat litter snacks before we go. But yes, went away. I just opened the door before he closed it, and then I jumped out. I had to walk home, and it was a play walk. There were pretty trees. It was winter. I think that's about it. My name is Junjo Ling Caldwell, and thanks for listening.
I want to thank Joanna and June for sharing their experience. So do you listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? Wherever you listen, can you take a second and follow or subscribe? Or take a minute and rate and review the show? Thanks for the support. This podcast is created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. And if you know someone who you think might enjoy this show, send them this episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next time.